welcome to this webinar broadcast. It's a Q&A webinar session from Green World. Well, it's always a delight to host a webinar of this kind, and especially when we have the top teams from NEBOSH involved as well, especially with Dee Arp and Matthew Powell. It's a delight. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce to our audience today. We've got Dee Arp, who is the Chief Operating Officer at NEBOSH. I'll definitely let them do their introduction as well. And we had a very good surprise entry today with Matthew Powell-Howard, who is the Head of Learning and Partnerships at NEBOSH as well. And with both Matt and Dee, we've worked very closely over the last decade, in fact. But yeah, obviously, we've gone a long way with NEBOSH. And the essential reason for today's Q&A session is ever since the rollout of the new specification of the NEBOSH International Diploma, it definitely raised a lot of questions, a lot of concerns with the students. We've tried our best to answer most of the queries. And in fact, what we then decided is we put out a poll and asked learners to come forward with whatever they could come up with. Maybe it was something which couldn't relate to the guidance documents. So I've got a set of questions that we sort of managed. We've tried to limit them, and I'm sure we will keep it under time as well. I hope to have it hosted in probably about an hour or so, as long as our audience don't get bored out of it. And on the panel today, as you can see, he's also there. We have got Shankar Srikumar as well, who's really been of assistance for me. So he's taking all the questions in the background and just making sure that they're being filtered out correctly. And if that's being addressed, there are a few learners who may ask the same question twice. So we'll make sure that's not being repeated, at least for the purpose of the webinar, we can keep it. So before I go ahead, let's start with Dee. Dee, if you could just give us and our listeners who are tuned in an introduction on yourself, please.
Hi, Sujith. Thank you. Delighted to be here with Matt and have this opportunity to answer questions directly. Yeah, so as you say, a decade of working together, Sujith. That's scary when you say that. But yeah, Matt and I pretty much started with NEBOSH at the same time, 2006, Matt, was it?
Yeah, 2006.
Yeah, so we've been around a long time and seen, lots of developments with all of our qualifications, not least the diploma. So yeah, very happy to be here today to share, some of the changes and the reasons for those changes with that qualification.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for that. And yes, Matt, over to you as well.
Hi, Sujith, and hello to Shankar sat there in the background as well. I think Dee probably did the intro for me, really. I'm head of learning and partnerships, and actually I report into Dee. So Dee and I, as Dee said, we worked together a long time. Worked with you guys at Green World a long time. In my case, in different roles, from an accreditation perspective, working with you as a course provider through to latterly qualification development. So it's lovely to be here today. We've not had the opportunity for obvious reasons to come over to the Middle East for a while, or India and the other markets you operate in. So things like this are absolutely essential, that we still have the opportunity to talk to our friends throughout the globe. So great to be here.
Thank you so much, Matt. We really appreciate
apologies. No problem. And apologies for the door flying open. My dog was using his head as a battering ram. We're obviously all working from home here in the UK still, so sorry about that.
And likewise, apologies if my dogs bark. There's 10 of them here, so apologies if there's a dog barking.
I think I took that into perspective, so I thought I'd set myself in an environment something similar. And
It's nice. Impressive. It's very
No, that's all credit to our guys, who really make sure that they want to have Green World going with with the cause, actually. So there's definitely a lot of work behind it. So just to get things started, what we've done is I have a lot of questions, but I've just sort of had them to pose it maybe to Matt and Dee yourself. So we'll take turns in addressing them. So one of the first questions we had, and I think this was the most common one, we've actually seen that there's been a significant update in the new specification of the NEBOSH International Diploma. And obviously, for the purpose of our audience, who are into the meeting today, we'd like to know if you could start with, why has the name of the qualification changed? Not by a big margin, but it's certainly interesting. It's got the suffix professionals to it at the end of it. And what's changed between that and the previous specification?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you and all the learners will be aware, when we bring in a new qualification, we'll still run the previous specification for a good while as well to ensure those learners can complete. So we need to have a different qualification title just so that they can be distinguished and they're identifiable in their own right. Mm-hmm. So for our regulator, we have to do that, and it makes sense that we can distinguish between the two. But I think more importantly, if you hit the nail on the head there, more importantly, we wanted a title that better reflected the health and safety practitioners. And that word professional absolutely reflects, the credibility and the recognition that the practitioners should be held against.
Right. So that gives learners a bit of an edge compared to what they were, probably doing with the previous specification. And it's just like having a new model a car, but just that you have some features enhanced onto it. But yes, that certainly helps with it, actually. So why was the need for the qualification to be updated per se? And we had a learner who asked, was it not possible to go with the paper-based testing, the 4 units that we have currently? And
shall I take this one, Dee?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
yes,
you go for that.
All of our qualifications are on a redevelopment cycle, actually. So without exception, we will always revisit. Once you have a product, new ideas come in, new needs of the end users, which really is the employer, start to be identified, and things evolve and just get better with time. So it's not as though people who have done previous specifications of the diploma are disadvantaged over those doing the current one. It's just a slightly different approach. A lot of the core content remains exactly the same. So where new content is identified, it's because somebody specifically or a significant group of people have said, actually, we need more information now on psychosocial risk, for example, because the statistics since the last time we developed it have continued to climb. So there's obviously more of a need for practitioners to be aware, to get involved, and to be informed on that piece of knowledge, information, skills, whatever it may be. So things just changing and evolving is a natural process for all of our products. Actually, the redevelopment of the diploma took a lot longer than we would do normally, just because the sheer amount of consultation we did. And then doing the review of a new assessment strategy takes time as well. And we would never just rush something out. It has to be absolutely fit for purpose for our learners. So, they're investing a lot of their own time, a lot of their own money very often in these things. It needs to bring real value. And that's why we did the change. It was time. And we're really happy with what we've introduced as a result. But it's different but the same. I'm sure. If you looked at the syllabus now compared to what the syllabus was 15 years ago, you'd see absolute similarities between all the specifications, because some knowledge is just core to what a safety practitioner needs. Underpinning knowledge, we'd call it, wouldn't we?
Okay, that's where it leads from, right? So that leads to my next question, because the one of the recent guidance documents, when the specification was rolled out, it also mentioned that the previous specification of 2015 has been withdrawn. I believe when the word withdrawn was used, it sort of sent out a vibe to some of the learners, assuming that it may have been taken off completely. So the question asked was, would it impact learners who have already acquired this qualification, in the old specification, or for those who are still in the middle of completing their previous units? So how would they probably fall in this category?
Yeah, I can answer that, Sujit. Yeah, maybe an unfortunate use of the word withdrawn, and we can certainly reflect on that for future communications. Right. What we meant by withdrawn is that there's a point at which we stop taking additional learners onto that specification. But absolutely, any learner on the old specification that is wishing to complete, they will have a good few years to do that. We're waiting for the finalised date from our regulator, how long we can give for that. But we're looking at until 2026, to allow learners the full enrolment period to complete the qualification. They will have the choice to move on to the new specification if they would prefer that. Okay. But because it is different and it is assessed in a different way, they won't be able to take any gained units across with them. They would have to start afresh with the new assessments. But in terms of learners that have completed on the old specification, as Matt said, there is equivalence there. It is the same qualification, but just adapted to better reflect, the risks of profile that a practitioner needs in workplaces today. So yeah, it's exactly the same qualification, but just adapted moving forwards. And if a learner is partway through, they can complete the specification or move to the new one.
To the new one altogether. So if they were to move, obviously, then the old ones would remain void. That's if they do a full transfer. Or they still have the option, because that's another question which was asked. I mean, the enrollment period for the new specification, it states it is 5 years as done with the previous. So that's been the same, no change in that. But the question asked was, does the rollover buffer period of 5 years still apply? Which means, let's assume a learner had enrolled today for the new specification, and they took up the exam for the first release, which is in September. Now, for obvious reasons, if they've passed it, it's good. But if not, if they were to take the exam on the next release, which is, say, mid of next year or maybe early next year, does the 5 year count from this year or from the time that they have acquired the unit pass?
Yeah. Sorry, Sue, just talking over you there, forgive me. It's for when they pass the unit. So if you imagine a 5 year period, so they pass year one, the first unit, they pass the second unit in the same year. If they then don't do anything at all after 5 years, those units will start dropping off. So they have 5 years to get through them. So, but the clock starts ticking the moment that first unit is passed.
Is passed. So they have to achieve the first unit, and then the 5 years.
The 5 years click in.
And that goes prorate as and when they finish the second unit. I mean, if they finish the second unit sometime the following year, it still
it would go from that first
from the very first unit. Now, it's a lot clearer now, because we have that ambiguity that it was a rollover from the unit. Every time a unit was passed, then they kept going. So
no, it's from the first passed one.
From the first passed one. That's a lot clearer. Right. So some of the new learners who actually joined in, when we tried to speak to them to understand what their background was, a common question asked was, what should be the prerequisite, or a formal entry to do this qualification? So the specification actually said that it's good to have an assumed knowledge of certificate level qualification, which is the IGC, and it also said about an SCQF level 6 or a 7 that would be recommended. If you could just elaborate on us, what is the SCQF, and maybe give a few examples so we could elaborate that to the learners.
Yeah, I think the best way of showing this, Sujith, would be I'm going to share my screen if I may. I think I'm allowed to. Am I allowed to share my screen? Have I got able to see a brightly coloured? So this is a document, and I'll send you the link across, Sujith, so maybe you can share it with our colleagues on the call.
Sure.
It's a document called Qualifications Can Cross Boundaries. So within the United Kingdom, we have. We're sometimes not all that united, and we have lots of different educational structures. Right. So when we talk about a level 6 qualification, we're regulated by the Scottish Qualifications Authority. So I don't know if I can highlight here. Oh, wrong one. So level 6, can you see my little hand on the screen moving around there?
Yes.
If you go into this blue column. So
that's
level 6 is broadly, if you read across, is we would say it's qualified skilled worker level, entry to higher education, completion of secondary education. So that's level 6 in Scotland. But to confuse things, level 6 in England and Wales, if we come along to this one here, level 6 is broadly equivalent to an honours degree. So it can be. Don't get too hung up about the levels. Is always my advice. Think certificate and diploma. So a certificate is broadly level 6 in Scotland, level 3 in England.
Right. Okay.
And then a diploma is level 10 in Scotland and a level 6 in Wales, so broadly equivalent to an honours degree level.
Mhm.
So if you just think diploma, honours degree, certificate, what we would say is sort of A-level standard in the UK, but it's that skilled worker qualification. We're looking for that level of education and understanding before people progress onto the diploma. It's not absolute prerequisite. We just strongly advise it because, again, it gives us that underpinning knowledge that we spoke about. We do get some exceptional learners who maybe come from an engineering background or have been undertaking a health and safety role, and they cope quite well on the diploma without doing that learning. But I would say as a just to sort of give you some confidence when you start doing the diploma, having that level 6 certificate, national general certificate, international general certificate, really does serve you well when you go on to that high level study.
Wow, Matt, that was actually knowledge to me. I've just matched apple to apple right now when you showed me that it's a different framework based on which the levels were actually put out. So
yeah,
yes,
you know, really the you know, in lots of ways, this is a bit clearer, the Wales framework, just because it gives you language and wording that you may understand more comfortably around, you know, vocational qualifications, honours degree. But yeah, certificate is level 6.
Right.
For us, level 3,
Level
Ofwat,
3.
which is England, and
Right.
level. So I think in places like Abu Dhabi, they have a very, very similar framework to the one we operate in under Scotland, and that's because SQA worked with the UAE in developing their framework.
Right.
So yeah, don't get too hung about. Just think certificate, diploma. That's the difference really in levels. But SEQF is just the levels which our regulator uses in Scotland. Okay.
Super. That
I will
answers my question.
Stop the share.
Right.
If I can figure out, there we go. Stop the share. And there, we're all back.
Yeah, we're back. Super. Right, Matt. So we'll probably look forward to that at the end of the
yeah,
session.
no, I'll send that link across and you can share it with everybody. Or I might be able to put it in the chat, actually. I'll try and put it in the chat.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I think maybe the chat is just temporarily disabled.
Okay. Don't worry about it then. I'll send you the link. Yeah,
that's fine. I'll definitely put up a reminder. So interesting. So it's some good stuff to the session here. So we've definitely got some you know, base or ground level knowledge. So now just let's get on to the qualification itself, the new specification. So what we understand is it's got 3 unit papers. Well, just the names have changed. The old one went by the names A, B, C, D, and now we've got it as ID 1, 2, and 3. So we understand that ID 1 is assignment-based assessment, and as far as the ID 2 and ID 3 are concerned, it's called as a case study, or we call it as. So the open book exam is what has certainly been a game changer since the start of the pandemic last year. And obviously with our IGC open book examinations, that's been a success. And that's exactly where we are headed to with the international diploma as well. So how if you could tell us, how different is the OB for ID1 from the case study assessment? And are all these submissions going on to the OB platform or the portal at the end of even the learner's assessment time? I mean, is it all the same that we consider, or is it different?
Yeah, the submission, we're working on guidance to explain the submission, but that should work in exactly the same way as the assessment is done for the general certificates. And yeah, absolutely right. So the case studies for units 2 and 3 are similar in format to the open book examination for the general certificates, in that learners will see a workplace scenario, but obviously for the diploma level qualification, that will be much more in depth. So for example, whereas the learners at the general certificate level will just see a scenario, for the diploma equivalents, there will be additional supporting documents. Right. So it will be more in depth, but the structure will be the same. There'll be a scenario, there'll be some questions around that scenario, there'll be some supporting documents. I can be clever like Matt, possibly, and maybe share my screen as well. Please, if that's possible. Can you see that?
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. Yep.
Fabulous.
Perfect.
So again, as Matt has suggested, I can send the link for this, but this is under International Diploma with that lovely new title for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals. And then under the resources section and assessment guidance, your learners just will now be able to find 3 sample assessments.
Wonderful. I think that's...
it's not complete, but it really will help explain the difference between 2 and 3 and the question that you asked around number 1. If that will let me access it on there, let me just move this. Okay, so there you can see the guidance for Unit 1. And this differs from the scenario case studies in that it has got 4 parts to it, as you can see there. So part 1 gives, again, a workplace scenario that the learners will be asked questions around various tasks. Part 2 actually asks the learners to apply those tasks to either their workplace or another workplace that they can get access to. So that absolutely is applying their knowledge to a real workplace. Part 3 asks learners to do some reflective tasks around their own, health and safety, leadership, for example, and the softer skills. And then part 4, there'll be a different short research project on each paper. But the sample, mindful of time today, but, once you and your learners access this takes you through in a bit more detail some examples and extracts of what each of those 4 elements will look like. So there's an example scenario there. Takes you can see it's more in depth than the general certificate. Then some example questions for that part 1. Similarly for part 2. So this is where we're actually asking the learners to apply their knowledge and understanding to a real workplace. So an example there, create an organizational risk profile. And then a reflection one. So here they're looking at leadership skills, and then the final part is the
research topic.
The research topic, yeah.
Right.
So that is much more extensive, a lot more application in there than the typical, obviously the general certificate level. But yeah, I'll send that link so learners will be able to see the difference there.
I think we'd really appreciate that, because yes, I think from where we are at, we probably took the samples for ID1, and I don't think we've probably gone on to the ID2 and ID3 yet. So that'll certainly help once we have the link, and we'll do a quick review before we could take it to the learners. Super. So now we have learners who would normally come up and from different categories. There are ones with probably decades of experience. There are ones that are probably just looking to switch from their certificate level to the diploma, and then there's a whole bunch which would say that no, I'm fine. I'll take it as it comes. So the question we were asked is, the guidance document said that it's practically impossible, for learners to complete all the units in one sitting. Yep, and I totally agree with that. It's definitely not like old school that we could do it. So what would let's say if the question here is, should the learner attempt the units sequentially, or are they allowed to take them in random order?
Yeah, do you want me to take this, Dee?
Yes,
First of all, I just say there's a huge thunderstorm over my house at the moment. So if I disappear, I'll try to get back on as quickly as I can. So sometimes it cuts the power. So there's no. We try to come up with a typical learner. When we're looking at marketing or whatever, and we kind of go, well, but there's very broad categories that we can say that's a typical learner. But when it comes to how they approach the assessments, it really does depend on their own circumstances. Dee and I were talking recently about this, and Dee mentioned that she's aware of a few people who have really, because they've been locked down for so long now, they've really been able to throw all their efforts and consolidate their learning and make great progress on the NEBOSH diploma. Other people are still juggling families and work life and everything else. So the first thing is, you can do the diploma in whatever order you want. So if you want to focus on the, the occupational health functions or whatever it may be, and that's where you've got a particular strength, concentrate your efforts there by all means. Have that conversation with Greenworld and see whether or not how you can support them in that. It's not uncommon for learners to join talk courses, for example, halfway through a unit. Sorry, not halfway through a program, but halfway through a diploma, and they'll jump on and off where they need to. So it's almost like a rolling enrollment. But in terms of how quickly people do it it really does depend on your own circumstances. I always admire greatly people do the diploma, international diploma. They're very often doing a degree level qualification in a second, third language. Someone says, I'm not just saying this to flatter. It's really impressive. It really is. I mean, both Dee and I, actually, Dee was previous top candidate. She likes me to. It's written into my contract that I mentioned that Dee was a previous NEBOSH top candidate. We've both been here ourselves.
That's right.
And actually, we both did different NEBOSH diplomas. As I said earlier, they've changed and evolved over time. But it took me a year to get through. I did a 2-part diploma, and each diploma took me a year to do. I don't know, Dee, how long it took you. Was you similarly about a year to get through?
About a year, a year, 18
months. So, and it was still the same structure where the exams were twice a year or whatever it may be. So there's more opportunity now actually to get through some of the assessments. But it's just about really getting the most out of your study. Really, it's not a race. It's about taking your time, understanding the concepts. That's key. Not just thinking, I just want to tick these off and progress. And we understand why you'd want to do that, but also think about getting the most value out of this learning, because it's an opportunity that probably won't come along again very often for you. This is about investing in you and in your future career aspirations. So and there's nothing worse than going to an exam that you're underprepared for. Some exceptional people do tick things off in 6 months, but right. they are the exception. They really are. Be realistic. I would always advise, and I always have advised, between a year and 18 months is absolutely doable. Right. Some people take the full 5 years. Absolutely fine. Some people take 3 years. There's no right or wrong reason. It's just about what you can do yourself, what you can fit into your busy life, because generally people are working, and they're working long hours because they've they're in a significant role and job. So don't beat yourself up if you're not completing this in 6 months.
That's right.
Set yourself. Sorry, my Teams is going off. Set yourself up with a sensible calendar for you to achieve your qualification. And you'll enjoy the process a lot more as well. Actually, it's already, challenging, stressful, but also enjoyable. So get the most out of it.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, that's great advice from Matt. And the key there, we know people want a qualification and that parchment, and that's so important. We understand that, but the key is the learning.
Yeah,
that's
right. With great learning partners like yourself, at Greenworld, that opportunity is there to get that learning. And I'd just add as well, with the new assessments, we've worked even harder on trying to make sure that they actually enhance the learning process.
Okay.
I always, people that know me well know that I always talk about and work towards assessment for learning instead of just assessment of learning, where people cram on that knowledge, regurgitate it, and then forget. This is about, as Matt said, embedding that learning and embedding it via the tuition, but also via the assessments as well, and then being able to actually make a difference in the workplaces.
Yeah, that's true, because eventually that's what's going to be, it's to put that into practice at the workplace.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't just make sense only having knowledge. You're right there. I mean, I liked one of the same question was asked even because as you know, Shankar is also one of our lead trainers in the program. So he put it very blunt and nice. He just says, you don't have a plane to catch, so you don't have to. You don't have to.
It's true. It's true.
Just take your time. Take it one module at a time. So that certainly explains. I mean, for sure, learners had that going on. Good. So on the assessment marking, as we're just progressing now onto the assessment bit. So the next question that will come in is on the marking side. how is the total and mark weightage given? I mean, unit-wise, because I understand that it's all aggregated down to 100, but probably the weight is questioned. I'm could be wrong. You could correct me as well. I believe for the ID1, it's out of a certain. It's definitely more than 100 marks, or maybe for the ID2, I'm not certain.
You're absolutely right. So for ID1, because there are all those tasks, it'll be between 550, 600 marks.
Right.
For Unit 1, but that will be very clear on each assessment paper, which task. So for example, I think 3 of the tasks are on one of the papers is 150 and one task is 100. So it'll be very clear for each of the tasks what the mark allocation is. But no, you're absolutely right. That will then be transferred into a percentage mark, and the percentage for each of the units will then be aggregated together to determine the grade of the qualification, whether or not that's a pass, a credit, or distinction.
Right. So if I put it in plain words, 3 of the unit papers would be finally aggregated out of 100.
Yes.
And then what is scored out of the 300, then we have the benchmark for the credit, the pass, and the distinction.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
So I'm going to read this so I get it right. So a pass will be 150 to 195 aggregated mark, credit 196 to 225, and a distinction 226 or higher. So you're right, Sujit, that's the aggregate of the percentage of each of those. Yeah.
Excellent. So we are on track then. That's good. And that then leads us to the post-assessment interview. This is something which we have thoroughly enjoyed doing with the IGC as well. The closing interview. That's it's not putting the learner in the spot, but that's definitely a way to find out, how is the effort done by the learner, if it's their own work, and obviously we've tried putting in a lot more emphasis that this is being done just so that the integrity of the qualification is maintained. So does it apply for all the units of the international diploma? Or, I mean, I know that it's, or maybe what we understood was it's probably for ID1, maybe not for ID2 or ID3, but
it's all 3.
It's all 3.
It's all 3. Again, I think even more important at this level of qualification, and back to that difference, we need people to make in the workplace. So it's to get that authenticity and assurance that the learner has done the work. But what, Sujit, as well, going back to that point about assessment, for learning, and also preparing learners for the workplace. Yeah, I know it's going to be a bit scary and a bit onerous, but actually it's great preparation for so many different scenarios in the workplace, like selling your latest project to the board. So yeah, we know it's an assessment. It's going to be a bit scary, but fabulous preparation. And for those learners that have put the work in and produced each of those assessments, it's going to be a breeze for them. They're going to enjoy talking about what they've done, and that's what that process will do. They're just going to be asked to explain how and why they put together those assessments. So absolutely nothing to worry about for those learners that have prepared and put that work in. And as Matt said again, taken the time to make sure they are learning and consolidating that knowledge and skills along the way.
Right. And I believe while we are still on the subject, we talked about the reason to do the post-assessment interviews to curb malpractice, and quite rightly so. We did happen to see the ethical manual, which was just distributed, I believe, in the last newsletter.
Right. Yeah, the report.
And that was a wonderful document. It had some good statistics which showed the effort NEBOSH have put into to try and see how they are out there. I mean, and we particularly like one catchphrase: if we will catch you. So that's that drives at least sort of a sense into learners that it has to be a genuine work. On that, there was it talked about an anti-plagiarism software that would be used to check the assessments. So just to give us a few words on what exactly is the software, and what might be the tolerance level that might be accepted if they use general references like legislations or acts, or if they were even taking snippets or illustrations from some journals of the internet. Is there something of that sort? Is there any percentage of a tolerance level that would be accepted?
Yeah, Great question. Yeah, and just to go back to that point, Judith, it's so important that we address malpractice. It goes back to that point that we want people that have got knowledge and skills and own those knowledge and skills. We don't want people in workplaces that are just professing to have them. So it's so important to us, to the brand, to learning partners like yourself, and to all the learners that put in so much genuine work to get these qualifications. So it's something that we won't ever lapse on, and we will catch you. We will catch you.
That's right.
So yeah, Turnitin is just one of the tools that we will be using for that. So the anti-plagiarism software is called Turnitin. It's been used for a long time in universities across the world. So what that software does is put the learner's submission into literally a database of thousands and thousands of other documents. So that will be academic journals, pieces of legislation, research reports, literally millions and millions of documents are all compared to the learner's submission. But I think most significantly, the learner submissions will also be compared to every other's learner submission. So if any learner is collaborating or sharing information, copying from each other, that is absolutely what this software will flag up to us in the ethical practice team. But yeah, great point. If a learner is referencing, appropriate, international standards or legislation or referencing something to support their assessment, that is absolutely fine. That of course is part of good assessing and good report writing. So we would expect a learner to do that, but to reference it and acknowledge the source of that. But yeah, that will be used on each of the assessments.
As you just spoke about Turnitin, there was another question just popped up on my screen here. It was talking about Turnitin itself, one of the learners. So it's just asked that if do learners actually upload the same answer script to Turnitin before they submit to NEBOSH? Means we do not know if this is an application that's available out there. Does it sort of aid a student to do a plagiarism check before the submission, or is it only after? So and I'm sorry that just popped in. So since we were on the topic, I thought
it's a good question. I know that a lot of universities use it in advance, so they do. Universities expect a much more academic piece of work. So they do use it in that sort of proactive way. They will ask their learners to make sure they've got their reference into academia correct. So it's used in that way. We're using it more in the reactive way. So in addition to checking academic documents, we're also checking that there isn't that collusion and collaboration between learners. So we're using it in a slightly different way to some universities would. So for us at the moment, we'll be putting it through the Turnitin. We won't be asking the learners to put it through in advance of submission.
Right. So, and this applies for all the units of submission in IDIP. So, yeah, that's clear as well, because we assumed that it was just the initial one, or the open book assessment one, which would be taken, the assignment that is, and probably the case studies were sort of going to be reviewed offline. So it's the assignment and the 2 case studies that would be reviewed by the software. Makes sense, actually.
And Sujit, sorry, can I just jump in there? It's in support of something that Dee just mentioned as well. This is just one of the tools that we have. That this is just one of the tools. Dee's part of Dee's team. Our business unit, we all work in the same unit, is the professional ethics department that we have at NEBOSH. We really resource the capturing, the investigating, and the finding malpractice, and we have absolute zero tolerance for all those things that Dee mentioned a moment ago. It's absolutely imperative that people who gain NEBOSH qualifications deserve to gain them, and we invest a lot of resource in capturing people. So the bit you mentioned, and that Dee just reiterated, we will find you. We'll go to every length to capture any malpractice. There's a different approach we take dependent on the level of malpractice, but it's something, it's zero tolerance. It really is, and we will go to great lengths to pick it up. So Turnitin is just one of the tools that we have available to us. So we're watching.
That's the right way to put it.
And we have to, and it's important. It's important.
And this, just to give you an example of that, when we direct the professional interviews for each of the diploma, assessments, it will be a very specific type of interviewing and questioning, which has been based on a lot of research, and it refers to asymmetric questioning.
Okay.
And what that means, it's a very structured way of allowing the interviewer to identify people that have been very truthful about their assessments and what they've written, and those that are not. So yeah, as Matt said, we've got an ever increasing toolkit of ways to find those people that literally do not deserve to be awarded an NEBOSH qualification.
True.
The good news is the exception. I think if you, thankfully, most people are doing this for good and valid reasons, in that they want to be the best they can be, and which is why they've selected to work with a gold learning partner like Greenworld, but also they've chosen to do the NEBOSH diploma, which is the gold standard. And we've all of us have worked hard to achieve that, and that's why people are so proud when they achieve these qualifications, and rightly so.
And I think that's really important to say, Matt. And again, great point, because sometimes, when you're addressing malpractice and, working with the ethical practice team, you're seeing that very small percentage, and it can be all encompassing. But yeah, we work with so many other people that have just got such a huge passion and a heart for health and safety. And that's what matters, and they're the people that are just making such an incredible difference in workplaces around the world. And I mentioned earlier about health and safety practitioners being deserving of that word professional and professionalism, and I think with the pandemic, never before has the world needed our profession, and I think there's a whole new respect coming to our profession as well.
100%.
So,
and the best day of our year, of our working year, Sujith, and is the NEBOSH graduation. And I can't remember if you or Shank has been over for it yet. I can't remember, but so I've certainly met Shank in the NEBOSH offices a few times. But the joy on that day, Dee, it's amazing, isn't it? How proud people are of what they've achieved. And hopefully some people on this call today will get to cheer them to the rafters at the Birmingham Philharmonic and meet you in person, because honestly the people are just overjoyed with what they've achieved, and rightly so.
And that's the start of the journey. It's the joy after all that hard work, but they're just beginning that incredible journey then to make a difference, literally making a difference to people's lives. And that's why we have zero tolerance on malpractice.
I think from what I've learned in my years here with Greenworld and with some of the health and safety qualification, is the right word is control measure. So therefore, it's definitely a control measure, having an anti-plagiarism software. So that's how we apply it back, just to see how the integrity is met. Super. And so we're just nearly a little more than halfway through. So the other question, I think Dee probably addressed this a short while earlier, and this is something similar. That is, we have learners who probably have done either one or two or no units at all of the previous specification. And the question is, some of them came back saying that, no, we've heard that this is the new one, this is the open book examination now, and it's the new specification. So can we enroll onto this new specification? And what happens to the ones that they've already achieved?
The answer, absolutely. So each of those learners have got their own personal choice to make. Unfortunately, if they have already achieved a unit on the old specification, because it is a completely different spec, different assessments, they can't carry that over. So if they've done one or two on the old specification, that just they'll have the unit certificates for that, but they will have to start again and do the 3 assessments we were just talking about for the new specification. But yeah, absolutely, every learner can enroll onto that new spec if that's what they choose to do.
Right, and I guess we would also be right in saying that that's the reason why it's being void is because in the new specification, it's a slightly different syllabus structure, and the approach itself it may be the same concept, because we could see there was a document that showed what has changed, what has been included, but it's definitely the new structure that is requiring the learner to take it from scratch, should they choose to move to the new specification
Absolutely right. It's the structure and the very different assessments. So, we have a lot of work to do behind the scenes with the regulator, showing that all the learning outcomes are mapped to assessment criteria and so on. And it's almost impossible to map between the two specifications to the rigor that they would expect.
True, that's right. So in your words, what would you say is probably the ideal approach to complete the units, or let's say in what time frame rather? I think Matt, yes, just gave us a brief on this. Yes.
Yeah, I think we ticked that off a moment ago. Really, you go at your own pace and your own speed. But I would advise that you do dedicate time where you can. Where that's your study period. If you otherwise, weeks just tend to sort of become other weeks and become other weeks. And if you're doing it via distance learning, e-learning, as Greenworld specialize in, as well as it's still meaning that you really need to think, well, Wednesday evening is my study period and Sunday afternoon, whatever it may be. But just set yourself a timetable. And I don't know if Greenworld, if you almost sort of program in when people are going to be expecting to hit an exam, because actually that's a very good discipline as well. If you've got it certainly worked for me. If I've got a deadline looming, then I'm going to hit that deadline, rather than saying, oh, Matt, deliver this on such and such date. So really think about, just have a road map through, but do it in such a way as that it's not going to become something you hate doing. It's something that you've set time for, personal development, personal investment, and you do it with joy in your heart. Maybe not joy in your heart, but you do something willingly. And
That's right.
This is just what I do. This is just what I do on this evening. I give so many hours here and so many hours there.
You're right, Matt, because it's not joy just while doing it. The joy that after you have achieved it, that also counts.
Yeah.
So you're right.
You feel
there.
great. Yeah, you feel great.
Sure.
And you're going back to what we said about the graduation. Yeah.
Yes, that's so. I think the next question I had also sort of was explained in the slide you shared, because there was a lot of ambiguity in the levels. Now there was a question which I'll be honest for sure. When we had learners come up to us and say, "I've done my diploma," we only focused on saying, "Yes, you have achieved a level 6." We never sort of compared it with the SQA. Now that we have understood that it's different regulatory bodies, that are there from the UK itself. It's the same level, but maybe numbered differently.
That's exactly the best way to think of it. Yeah, yes,
Great.
absolutely,
A great summary.
Suja. Yeah, and for those reasons, that's why we just talk about cert diploma where we can, just because it gives that loses that ambiguity. But yeah, the way you just positioned it there was perfect.
So I think we'll play with that. I was just trying to recall my gaming days actually when I put that, because every time you pass a level, then you get some, and you go on. So wonderful. That's right. So this is a question that also came in, and we have most of these learners. Obviously looking to acquire the diploma and then take up memberships definitely with IOSH. There was the first question is at what level would they be considered once they have by, let's say, for example, an IOSH membership. We've got the affiliate, and it works on to tech, and then the grad and so on. So once they've taken the international diploma, at what level do they get the membership?
The answer to this is a little bit complicated, Sujit, because the landscape at IOSH is changing at the moment, because they are changing their levels a little bit. So, and I think there's an announcement going out sort of September time, as we understand it. They've done a lot of work on a new blueprint 2.0. Some of your learners may have sort of read something on that in the press. So we've actually been actively involved in that as NEBOSH. We engage with IOSH wherever we can. Both Dee and I are both chartered members of IOSH. They're our professional body as well. So we have a lot of time and respect for them. So at the end of I'm losing track of time. So the middle of last year-ish, they wanted to start doing some work on their membership structures, and actually they did a moratorium. They put a halt on recognizing any new qualifications while they worked on their new membership structures. That piece of work has been completed now. They invited us to submit early our existing products and any new products for recognition. against their new framework, because we're a long time associate with us. There was ourselves and there was other universities and awarding bodies who were involved with IOSH. So what I can report, absolutely categorically, easy for me to say, is that our new diploma is an absolute map to their new framework. We've had that in confirmation from IOSH. What we now need to do is do the application and pay a fee for the approval, formal approval of the diploma for recognition, which is going on in the back of the scenes, and that absolutely is going to happen. So we've got no anxiety that the qualification will not get recognition. So in terms of the Dee and I, for example, and Shankar, I think as well, are chartered practitioners as it stands. We're now going to go to chartered professional, I think.
Wow.
Under the new structure. I can't remember for the life of me what the new title for the graduates is. I'm not sure if graduate remains, or I think they were a bit concerned that graduate maybe sounded a little bit junior, and that's not always the case. You can sometimes get some very, very senior graduate members, they've not progressed. So I think that title is changing, but the qualification, we are absolutely expecting whatever replaces graduate or graduate remains, that's where this qualification will sit. So we don't have any anxiety that the qualification is not going to get recognized. What we didn't want to do is delay the release of something that we think is fit for 2021 just while IOSH sorts out their membership, because so by the time people have qualified on this diploma, that will all be in place. So we always seek to get recognition for our qualifications. You will have seen that, and I say already quite a lot. Well, an enormous amount of mapping has already been undertaken, and that went in back in sort of May time. So my colleagues who work in our product development department, it's on their list now to do the formal application and put in for recognition with IOSH.
Perfect. So
hopefully
rest assured, I think yes, because
it's in flight, is what I would say.
Yes, that's what learners had a bit of a confusion. They said,
understandably,
the older specification is definitely approved, and the question we had was very blunt, as in we heard it wasn't the new specification isn't approved. We said, look, there's no question of not being approved. Anything that you take under the NEBOSH umbrella is approved for sure, but it's just just as you put it, Matt, that it's a new specification. It needs its time to pass through those the levels, and obviously it's out there. So
and it's a brand new process that IOSH are using and trialing, and just like us and like Greenworld and like every other organization, it takes a while to sort of embed these new processes, because they're a quality organization just as NEBOSH is, and they're not going to rush into anything which isn't fit for purpose, because it just causes work. So people work to their own timetables, understandably. So.
And does this apply to the other memberships as well, like the IIRSM?
Well, double IRSM, I think I'm right in saying that that's already been recognised. Dee, I think it has with double IRSM. I think that one's already in place, because they're not, they've not changed the structure. They've not changed the structure. Yeah, so some things are already in place, and if we see there's a need for recognition by anybody, we'd always explore it. So it's just what we do to bring as much value to our learners as possible.
Super. So that's excellent as well. And yes, then comes the bit where now they've acquired the qualification, and then obviously they have peers, and they would say, listen, I've finished on the new one. The other guy says, I finished on the old one. So there's obviously that sort of a vibe where they say that I think I'm on the old one, I may feel disadvantaged, or I may not be in sync with what's out there, and so that sort of will it hamper learners, on the old, if they've finished on the old, and the ones that are finishing on the new, are they benchmarked differently in any way?
No, I mean, I would argue it's usually the other way, Sujith, where we go, the one I did was better than the one, Shankar did. Shankar did was much harder. It's usually the other way, actually, where people feel very, very angry. They shouldn't have changed it. The one I did was perfect. I think the honest answer is, a qualification is just one form of one indicator of competency. There's so much more you need to express. having a NEBOSH diploma will certainly get you noticed, get you spotted, and get people wanting to talk to you and see whether or not you're fit for purpose. But ultimately, you've still got to have the same soft skill. You've still got to have the appropriate soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
You've still got to be able to be confident, to be knowledgeable, to be, had good experience and exposure to the risks in which you then are going to be expected to manage. So it is honestly, it's not even a consideration. It's like everyone who does a degree. Mm-hmm. Degrees change and evolve over time. People don't look at it any unfavorably. One that was done 10 years ago to one that's done now, they're just different, and they're what's fit for purpose at the time of studying, in all honesty. But there's nothing stopping any one of us, and we should be doing anyway, doing IPD. So if somebody looks at a NEBOSH diploma and says, do you know what, I'd really like to know something more about that, then one, I'm sure they'd be Greenworld would be delighted to sell them some of those learning materials to get them to bring them up to speed. Or we live in an age where we've got access to so much information, so we should be upskilling anyway, and that's what matters. Somebody who's qualified 20 years ago, like me and Dee were, if we'd not bothered doing anything since, then our knowledge would have degraded. But we're not. We're learning all the time, just as we should be as health and safety professionals.
Right. Absolutely. We're 3-4 specifications ago.
Yeah. Well, must be.
But it's a really valid point. I'm still proud to say I've got a NEBOSH diploma. I don't feel I need to quantify or qualify when that was or what specification was. It's a NEBOSH diploma, and I think that, as Matt said, that's what counts.
Right. Just to clarify on that, as we spoke, one other comment came up. So if it's a student who has completed the old syllabus about 5 years ago, is it required that they have to get a recertification on the new syllabus, or can it? No.
Qualifications don't work that way, Sujith. A qualification is with you for life. It's like I'm trying to think. When I was 16, I got a load of maths. So don't ask me any maths questions. I won't be able to answer them now. But nobody's going to take that qualification off me. It's not like a forklift truck license where skills degrade.
Correct.
And I should be retested every 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. It should be based on risk, shouldn't it? So skills do grade. We know that. But as professionals, we are upskilling, we're informing, we're looking for new opportunities for growth anyway. So and 5 years, as Dee just said, 5 years not old. I speak to people. I speak to somebody the other day who did a NEBOSH 5-part diploma. Where you had to, and they're at the top of their game as a professional. They've got a very, very senior role within the rail industry. So it's about just maintenance of skills, getting new skills. So the diploma will get you so far, but then to be a senior practitioner, you then need to know information on finance, on accountancy, on people management, on marketing. These are all the type of skills that a fully rounded practitioner gives you. We'll take you as far as we can with the time we've got available. But then there's an expectation. You want to see your career go. You've got the absolute solid base to build it from. But you're going to be grabbing all sorts of knowledge as you progress through your career. Yeah.
Excellent. And we're nearly there. And the next question is quite interesting. And I believe this is from one of the broadcasts that came out from NEBOSH very recently. And surprisingly, we had this question asked from a learner as well, who's actually tuned in. I was just trying to check if he's on, because he posed the question. He's from Kenya in Africa, and there was a recent communication from NEBOSH that stated that it has been recognized by the local government as part of occupational safety. If you could let us know what exactly is and why is it gained that advantage there, particularly in Kenya.
So I think, and I'm open to be corrected on this, workplaces in Kenya get inspected, of course they do. They have a regulator, they have a robust regulatory system, and they're really they are raising the standards of occupational health and well-being throughout the country. So one thing they wanted to do was bring in really competent health and safety officers, managers, people who know what they're talking about, in order to help continue to raise that standard. So we often do lobbying. We work with our learning partners, we work with local government, work with whoever, to start lobbying government to get recognition of NEBOSH qualifications whenever and wherever we can. So they took a look at the International Diploma syllabus. They felt that it was absolutely appropriate for the type of health and safety professional that they want to be operating in country, and they recognised it as a suitable qualification for a health and safety professional. And it's, you know, that sort of approach is, you know, we've had similar success in places like, I don't know, Qatar or you know, numerous countries, you know, where we also work with regulators as well. So in the United Kingdom, for example, sorry, not United Kingdom, Great Britain, because we're only covering Great Britain with our regulator HSE. We train their regulatory inspectors in a specific NEBOSH diploma. So when the regulators are going out, they're really well informed of what their role is as well. So we look to engage with regulators in countries across the globe. I think it's about 130 countries we now work in, Dee. Is it something like that?
Wow, impressive.
And anytime a regulator wants to speak to us, we would absolutely welcome that conversation, in all honesty. Because, you know, they're important, very, very important in country in raising those standards, and it's an absolute fit for us to have those conversations.
Super, Matt. I'm sure we'll definitely look forward to, you know, any future communication that comes up from NEBOSH, where they've got that recognition with you know, a government entity, and that certainly opens up a lot of opportunities for professionals who are looking to. I think I might be more valued there if I could, you know, offer my services. So yes, that's definitely a very good initiative. And last but not least, this has come from a very interesting learner who's actually looking to migrate to Canada. And obviously now, so this is a question which came as a surprise to me. I believe in Canada they have something known as the World Education Service. It's called the WES. That's the acronym actually. And the query was, they wanted to know if the NEBOSH International Diploma would be accepted for the Education Credential Assessment. That's what they call it there in Canada. Is it something that you might have any idea on?
It's something we're looking at, as Matt's explained about getting that professional recognition from IOSH and IRSM. We're now working on extending that to look at the professional bodies in Canada, America, New Zealand, and South Africa, and so on. So we did that with the previous specification, but now it's changed. We need to revisit those bodies and redo that mapping and reapply for that recognition. So that is something we're looking at next.
Wonderful. So I think that's in the pipeline. Well, that actually, you know, was my set of full of questions that came in. We just had kept the window open for another 2 minutes. I should thank you all for, you know, for all the time that you have been speaking over to me with the queries.
Pleasure.
So I'll just pick any one that hasn't been answered. Okay, yeah, there was a question that has just come up now. It says, will NEBOSH provide any sample Q&A or question and answer, as this is a completely new approach? They were asking, so one of the students has been very blunt. He's asked, it's just for me to know, what do I write and what would be the expectation of the verifier, of the NEBOSH verifier?
Yeah, we're looking at doing something around that. So as I say, we've just produced those sample assessments that I referred to earlier. So, I mean, certainly what learning partners and learners have got already is something to work with. So learning partners will be able to get the learners to do some, you know, sample answers to that and give feedback. So that can happen already. But yeah, we are looking at certainly doing some snapshots of expected answers. Again, we're very mindful not to do full scripts so that they don't get regurgitated and reused and resubmitted, although when we do that, they will be put in the Turnitin database, so it will highlight immediately if anybody's used any of our standardized answers. So yeah, hopefully a great starting point is those samples that learners and learning partners can start, you know, using as part of the formative assessment and preparation.
Wonderfully, thank you so much for that. Yes, that certainly explains with all the questions answered. I'd like to put the favor back to you all. If there's anything that we haven't covered as part of the question that you'd like to share as a bit of trivia or information for our audience tuned in, please, you know, I'd like to give maybe a minute or two to either of you. So,
nothing from me, Dee. I don't know about you.
No, I think just to reiterate that, and we've covered it already, but just to reiterate it because it's so important that, yeah, this is a course, it is tuition, but it's about the learning. It's about that learning journey and taking the time, as Matt referred to earlier, to really enjoy it, really, right. Because this is going to be the foundation, again, as Matt referred to, for people's careers. And it's such a critical and vital and important career. It literally makes a difference to people's lives and health and well-being. So it's just to reiterate that point. Yeah, we need to understand the learning outcomes. Understandable, people want to know about, well, what should a good answer look like? But if you always take it back to the learning, yes. if you take it back to the learning and you have that, then the assessments are going to just be a breeze. So always go back to your tutors, to your learning partner, and just understand, the syllabus and the learning outcomes in it. And once you've got that, you've got the learning to deliver the assessments, but you've also got the learning to make that difference in the workplace.
I think that's well said. This is what we normally emphasize to our learners as well, regardless of if it's not just a diploma, any qualification that they take. It's not just to take it as a piece of paper. They have to take it as a knowledge and apply it, at the workplace. So that certainly helps. Matt and Dee, I can't thank you all enough, and I'm sure the team at Greenworld are definitely, obliged for, you taking your time out for this Q&A webinar session. We've had a wonderful Q&A. We've got most of our questions answered. We are certainly going to, and for the learners who have tuned in today, we would share a copy of this recording, so that if they've missed in or if you've just tuned in somewhere in the middle, you can definitely have. It's been very informative. Most of the questions that I think it wouldn't get easier than this. Putting it over a guidance document, it was a lot easier to have it spoken over and addressed. And we really look forward to bringing another event of this kind, hopefully in the near future. And it gives us a feel-good factor. With Greenworld having our partners on board like NEBOSH, it helps us go a long way. So. Thank you so much, Matt.
Likewise, we're partners, and likewise, thank you for the opportunity for Matt and I to be here.
You'll have a wonderful rest of the day, and have a pleasant evening, Matt.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.